This is just a quick video just to explain what's going on here. It probably needs a bit of explaining, but the idea behind this, it's a kind of Beatles Yellow Submarine inspired worm tower. The story behind that is I was kind of working on these towers as soil feeding stations, and the little holes here are aeration fittings, and they're going to have brass gauze in there and a little bit of nylon mesh as a filter. And they kind of look a little bit like portholes, so the idea came up, and that was on the Worm Composting UK. It was Susie Chaos who kind of mentioned the Yellow Submarine thing, and then obviously I kind of thought, oh yeah, it's kind of a good idea actually. I like the idea of having the portholes in the sides, so I've kind of cut out some of these bits and pieces to make windows. So on the side of this is just going to be an aeration fitting. It looks a little bit like a periscope. So that's going to go onto the top of the bin, and I might have a few of those. And also, if you're familiar with the Yellow Submarine, it's got a railing around the top which is red, and what I thought about doing is making the railing on top using a PVC overflow pipe and basic sort of pipe elbows and fittings, so I can kind of fabricate that out of the tube and then fit that around with the elbows and the T-pieces. I might get some plastic sort of primer and paint that bit as well. But this was really a prototype. It's obviously not a Yellow Submarine, it's not yellow, and I'm trying to get hold of the yellow containers. There's a company, I think they're called Eco Stackers. I think the eco part is they're all food grade, and there's certain free from heavy metals, things like that. Also, when they're cutting them out, when they demold them because these are like blown mold or blow molded, they use all the swarf and then they reuse all the swarf and all the moulding flash and things like that. But I've got some videos of these worm towers before. So it's a 25 litre container that I've cut the top off. I made a jig to cut the top off square, and then I've made a template to route out, a sort of pattern route out a lid so that fits in. This container is slightly different, so when I actually get the yellow containers, I'm going to kind of cut it a little bit higher up so it goes in, and that will give me a bit of a tighter fit on the lid, so the lid just pops off. Don't really need to see inside. I've shown inside these things before. I haven't got the aeration kind of tube going down the centre, and I haven't got the subfloor in this one. This one is a soil feeding station rather than a kind of fermenting bin. I'll just open the porthole so you can see inside. But if you look through the window, you can see the holes in the base. So the idea is this will be in soil contact, and then once there's part composted material in there, you have that ground contact, and then the worms will be free to climb up inside the tower. So I call it a soil feeding station because the castings in here, the idea is you're not actually harvesting the castings. The idea is that composting worms will break the material down, and then things like lobworms will actually work that material deeper down into the soil as well. So the end product is that you're just actually feeding a bed or fertilising a bed and improving the soil, as opposed to getting castings which you can kind of strain or sift and then use those as sort of soil amendment for potting composts and things like that. But I work as an instructor in a school, so things like this interest me because there's all sorts of different skills, different materials, different techniques involved in making it, and I think that's it's an interesting thing. I mean, you can make a worm bin and it's just a bin with worms in it, or you can just put some creativity into it and make something fun. So that's what I've tried to do with this. These are little brass turnbuckles, just to kind of shed door closer things, just little stays. I've got those on there. I kind of thought they look a little bit like waterproof bulkhead doors on a ship, so they kind of felt a little bit nautical, so I could go along with that. Obviously Yellow Submarine, it's a cartoon, it hasn't got much detail on it, but it's a bit more practical to have those. I could probably make concealed fittings, but then I'd need to make more parts, so it looks quite good, and the brass will dull down a little bit when it's outside. So that's the kind of bigger viewing window. And what I do like about this is there's a genuine application, a genuine reason to have a window. And I thought about doing this before on some worm towers. and it just gives you that insight into what's happening down in the soil. And as an extension of this, I thought it would be quite fun to actually set up a camera on a mount and have a box that's fitted onto this, and then I have something like a Raspberry Pi which could do an automatic time lapse. So when you've got the different layers of, you might have part composted material, you might have some wood chip, you might have some biochar, there might be some shredded cardboard, there might be compost rolls and things like that, and there might be some fresh food waste as well. So you can actually see what's going on and going down in deep into the compost, or to the worm casts as the material composts. So I think it's got potential, and another extension of this, and this is why I like the group, the Worm Composting UK. When I first joined joined up, I thought, okay, you've got worm bins, you've got I don't know, original organics kind of bin. You put worms in it. How can there be enough to kind of talk about in terms of having a whole discussion group about it? But it's one of those things. The more you look into it, the more you realise. I think there's a David Attenborough quote. It was the more you find out about nature, the less or the more you realise you don't know about it, and it's that not knowing which makes it more kind of magical, more fascinating. I think if you've got I don't know, an interest where you know everything there is to know about it, then in my mind that wouldn't really be interesting. It's looking at different ideas, and obviously everyone on this planet's trying to kind of make it up as they go along, and obviously look at the kind of climate crisis and the problem the world's going through. No one really knows what they're doing. We're running into mass extinctions, and it's a kind of disaster, but we're really just trying to figure out how to get along, and in terms of burning fossil fuels and producing all that CO2 all in one go and changing the climate, it just goes to show that nobody's actually got a clue about what's going on. So I think the more you can look into things like this and encourage children and younger children to get involved in looking at nature and wildlife, and realise what a wonder this is, and what a privilege it is to actually share the planet with half of this life. And I think if you can get through to even a handful of students, if they go into horticulture or change their change their mind about agriculture, think, oh, agriculture is just farming, it's just for kind of country bumpkins, and then realise there's lots of contemporary research which is looking into this, which is really fascinating. So it's an interesting thing to be involved in, and I think it's quite a unique opportunity being able to kind of mould young people's minds and give them some insight and some inspiration. And even doing things like this myself, I'm kind of intrigued to see what's going to go on through this little windows as this progresses. And obviously you can get one of these containers, you can tip it out, you've got the worm castings in there, but in terms of interactions and different kind of soil life and microorganisms, you're not going to be able to see the microscopic things, but you'll see interactions between wood lice and how they break down material, and fungal activity as well. And so the idea of having the window, even though it's kind of novelty, this is a bit of fun, it has got serious applications. As an extension of this, what I'd like to do is have a kind of worm tower, where you've got a grow tower combined with the worm tower. So it's got all the kind of root growth, all the fungal activity, all the kind of long-term soil life, and then you're adding food as well, so you're actually feeding worms in the same sort of container. So I think that will be interesting, and I do like having the idea of these windows. And it first came out with the little portholes, and obviously the porthole's fun. It gives it that kind of submarine kind of look, a bit slightly sort of nautical, but at the same time having a larger window, can't find which way that goes best. That's best that way. Having a bigger window gives you much more insight into what's happening inside. So I've got the larger window on this side, and then I've got a window on the back, and then I've got the porthole on the other side. The idea with I'm trying to use reclaimed materials. So one issue with this is, because this is high density polyethylene, it's kind of it's resilient, it's tough, and it's flexible. But the problem is acrylic, which is this is old offcuts from a laser cutter. They do shop signage and lettering for shop fronts and things like that. The problem with the acrylic is it's quite fragile, and so to support this I've actually used, I don't know if you're going to be able to see, but it's some of this was 6mm polycarbonate and some was 6mm or 5 or 6mm acrylic, so it's super tough. And it kind of reminds me of when you go to the zoo and you see the kind of the wild animals behind the enclosures and the lions and tigers and things like that. So it's got that kind of feel. It's a bit like a kind of shark tank or something like in I don't know, SeaWorld or somewhere like that. Obviously you don't need the 5mm acrylic or polycarbonate to stop the worms getting out, but I don't know, it's just got that sort of fun kind of feel to it. But I made, in one of my other videos I show a sort of example of pattern routing. So to make the cutouts I just screw the template to the plastic. I leave the cellophane on there to stop it getting prevent it from getting scratched. Screw this down to a bit of timber, just a few of those screws, and then I route around it with a bearing guided a router bit, and that gives you a nice precise cutout, or a nice precise piece of plastic to fit into the cutout. Likewise with the opening as well. I'll screw this, I've lined it up on the centre line so that's in the right place, measure it from top to bottom so it's in the right place and it's square, and then I'll screw that to the plastic and then use a router with a ball bearing guided bit to route round a nice precise opening. So it's one of those sort of things. With the Facebook group, what I do enjoy is if I can kind of post something like this, someone else might sort of have a similar idea, or things like using wheelie bins. So it'll be the similar thing as this, but it's a larger scale. And I was speaking to Dan on the group, and he mentioned about using washing machine glass as a kind of porthole. And obviously you've got the curvature on the glass, so you could actually, or children could actually get their face right up to that, and you'd get a real sort of 180-degree view of what's going on inside. I think that would be quite a good application of using recycled materials. So the container itself is recycled from a car wash. It's held old car wash detergent. These are 300 or 500ml carbonated water bottle tops. The carbonated ones seem a bit more sturdy because they've obviously got a hold pressure. So when you cut the tops off to make these fittings, they just fit in there nicely. Yeah, the plastic I mentioned, that's tinted, which I kind of like. My battery's running out on my laptop. Yeah, so I made contact to another company. It's called 2K Laser Cutting. That's in Bishop Stortford. I just mentioned I was doing something about sustainability and recycling, and he actually mentioned, because of the COVID crisis, he's been working with lots of clear acrylic, so it's 3 and 5mm acrylic.